What if I told you that when a deceased loved one appears in your dreams, it's not just your subconscious playing tricks on you? What if there's something far more profound happening that could change your entire understanding of life and death? The man known as America's sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce, documented over 14,000 psychic readings that reveal shocking truths about these encounters that most people completely ignore. Have you ever woken up from a dream where someone who passed away spoke to you, warned you, or simply appeared with such vivid clarity that it felt more real than reality itself? If you have, then you need to hear what Cayce discovered through his extraordinary gift. Today, I'm going to reveal 3 documented cases from his readings that will make you see these dreams in a completely different light, show you the specific warnings Cayce gave about ignoring these encounters, and share the remarkable healing testimonies of people who learned to listen. But first, let me ask you this. What if these aren't dreams at all? Edgar Cayce, working from his modest home in Virginia Beach, entered trance states that connected him to what he called the Akashic Records, the cosmic library of all human experience. In reading after reading, people came to him desperate for answers about their departed loved ones. What Cayce revealed through these sessions would challenge everything mainstream science believed about consciousness and death. In reading 136:18, a grieving mother asked Cayce about her son, who had appeared to her repeatedly in dreams since his passing. The skeptics around her insisted she was simply processing grief. But wait, Cayce's response changed everything about how we understand these encounters. Cayce explained that consciousness doesn't die with the physical body. Instead, it transitions to different dimensions of existence, and under certain conditions these departed souls can indeed communicate with the living through dreams. But here's what shocked even Cayce's stenographer. He revealed that these communications often carry urgent messages that the living desperately need to hear. This changes everything about consciousness, doesn't it? The mother, in reading 136:18, learned that her son was trying to warn her about a financial decision that would have devastated the family. When she followed the guidance from her dream encounter, she avoided losing their home. But this was just the beginning of what Cayce would uncover about these mysterious dream visitations. Here's what Cayce revealed in reading 254:68 that will shock you about the true nature of these encounters. A businessman from Kentucky approached Cayce after his deceased father appeared in 3 consecutive dreams, each time pointing to a specific location in the family's old farmhouse. The family dismissed it as wishful thinking, but Cayce's reading revealed something extraordinary. The father's soul was indeed communicating, trying to guide his son to important family documents hidden in that exact location. When the family finally investigated, they discovered a will that secured their inheritance and revealed family history that had been lost for generations. But wait, there's something even more remarkable about how these communications work that I'll reveal in just a moment. Cayce explained that departed souls often remain connected to earthly concerns for a period after death, especially when they have unfinished business or urgent messages for their loved ones. In the Akashic Records, these souls can access information about future events that could affect their living family members. Think of it like having a loving guardian with access to a cosmic internet of all knowledge, desperately trying to send you an email through the only connection available, your dreams. But here's what Cayce warned that most people never understand. These communications have a limited window of opportunity. In reading 341-22, Cayce explained to a widow that her husband's ability to communicate through dreams was strongest in the first year after his passing, but would gradually fade as his soul progressed to higher spiritual dimensions. She had been ignoring the dreams, dismissing them as grief-induced hallucinations, the tragedy. She missed crucial guidance about their family business that could have prevented its collapse. This is why Cayce emphasized that we should never ignore these dream visitations. But how can you tell the difference between a genuine spiritual communication and an ordinary dream? Here's the revelation that changed everything for thousands of Cayce's clients. Genuine communications from departed souls have specific characteristics that Cayce documented across hundreds of readings. The deceased person appears with unusual clarity and presence, often younger or healthier than when they passed. They communicate specific information that the dreamer couldn't have known otherwise. Most importantly, these dreams carry an emotional weight and urgency that lingers long after waking. In reading 2067-1, a woman reported that her deceased mother appeared in a dream, urgently telling her to check on her elderly neighbor. The woman almost dismissed it, but something about the dream's intensity compelled her to act. When she visited the neighbor, she found the elderly woman had fallen and been unable to call for help for 2 days. The intervention saved the neighbor's life. But wait, there's something even more extraordinary about these dream communications that connects to Cayce's teachings on reincarnation and soul groups. Cayce revealed that we don't just randomly encounter any deceased person in our dreams. The souls who appear to us are typically part of our soul group, individuals we've shared multiple lifetimes with, connected by bonds that transcend physical death. These connections create what Cayce called vibrational channels that allow communication across dimensional barriers. Think of it like spiritual family members who remain concerned about your well-being even after graduating to higher dimensions of existence. They're not bound by physical limitations anymore, so they can perceive threats, opportunities, and guidance that your conscious mind cannot access. This understanding transforms how we view grief and death itself, doesn't it? In reading 5756-4, Cayce explained to a grieving father that death is not an ending but a transition, like moving from one room to another in an infinite house. The departed remain conscious, retain their love for family members, and often serve as spiritual guides during crucial moments in our lives. But here's the warning Cayce repeated in reading after reading. We must be spiritually receptive to receive these communications. Modern American life, with its constant distractions and materialistic focus, often blocks our natural psychic abilities. Cayce recommended specific practices to increase our receptivity to spiritual communications, including meditation, prayer, and maintaining what he called a spiritual attitude in daily life. But here's what shocked me most about Cayce's documented cases of dream communications from the deceased. In reading 1472-2, a young woman reported that her deceased grandmother appeared in dreams showing her specific herbal remedies for a mysterious illness that doctors couldn't diagnose. Following the dream guidance, she prepared teas and treatments exactly as shown in the visions. Within weeks, her condition completely resolved. Medical tests confirmed she was completely healthy, baffling her physicians. This case revealed that departed souls retain knowledge and can access healing information from the Akashic records to help their living loved ones. Your deceased grandmother who knew folk remedies, your grandfather who understood mechanics, your mother who had intuitive wisdom about relationships, their knowledge doesn't disappear with death. It becomes available to guide you through life's challenges. Here's the revelation that will change how you view every dream encounter with deceased loved ones from now on. Cayce discovered that these communications often intensify during periods of crisis or major life transitions. The departed souls can perceive when their loved ones face crucial decisions, health challenges, or spiritual crossroads. They intervene through dreams because they understand consequences that the living cannot see. In reading 3744-1, Cayce explained that time operates differently in spiritual dimensions. Departed souls can perceive probable futures based on current choices and desperately try to guide their loved ones toward better outcomes. It's like having a loving family member who can see around corners, warning you about obstacles or pointing you toward opportunities. But wait, there's something even more profound about these dream visitations that connects to America's growing spiritual awakening. Cayce predicted that as humanity evolves spiritually, our natural psychic abilities would strengthen, making communication with departed souls more common and clear. He saw this as part of the spiritual renaissance that would emerge in the latter part of the 20th century and continue into the 21st century, which is exactly what we're witnessing in America today. The growing interest in meditation, energy healing, consciousness studies, and metaphysical teachings represents humanity's return to its natural spiritual abilities. In this context, dream communications from deceased loved ones aren't supernatural anomalies. They're natural expressions of our expanding consciousness. This is why Cayce emphasized that we shouldn't fear these encounters, but welcome them as gifts from the spiritual realm. In reading 288:27, a man reported terrifying dreams where his deceased brother appeared agitated and distressed. Cayce revealed that the brother was trying to warn about family members who were making dangerous choices. Once the family addressed these issues through prayer and intervention, the brother's dream appearances became peaceful and loving, eventually fading as his soul progressed to higher dimensions. Here's what Cayce taught about responding to these dream visitations that could transform your spiritual life. First, maintain a journal specifically for recording dreams involving deceased loved ones. Document every detail immediately upon waking, as these memories fade quickly in our material-focused consciousness. Look for patterns, repeated messages, or specific guidance that emerges over time. Second, approach these dreams with reverence and gratitude rather than fear or skepticism. Cayce explained that fear creates spiritual barriers that block clear communication, while love and openness create clearer channels for receiving guidance. Third, follow up on any specific guidance received in these dreams, especially regarding health, relationships, or important decisions. Cayce documented numerous cases where ignoring dream guidance led to missed opportunities or avoidable difficulties. But here's the most profound aspect of Cayce's teachings on dream communications with the deceased. These encounters serve a dual purpose. Yes, they provide guidance and warnings for the living, but they also offer comfort and healing for both the departed soul and their living loved ones. The communication helps the deceased complete unfinished emotional business, express love that couldn't be communicated before death, and gradually release earthly attachments as they progress spiritually. For the living, these dreams provide proof that love transcends death. Consciousness continues beyond physical existence, and we're never truly alone in facing life's challenges. This understanding can transform grief into spiritual connection and fear of death into anticipation of continued existence in higher dimensions. In reading 1152-3, Cayce told a grieving widow that her husband's frequent dream appearances were his way of helping her understand that their love bond was eternal, and that he would be waiting for her eventual transition to the spiritual realm. As she accepted this truth and stopped clinging to grief, his dream visits became less frequent but more peaceful, eventually shifting to subtle signs and synchronicities that reminded her of his continued presence and love. This reveals the ultimate truth about why we should never ignore when deceased loved ones appear in our dreams. These encounters represent the universe's way of demonstrating that consciousness is eternal, love transcends physical death, and we're all connected through invisible spiritual bonds that death cannot break. They're glimpses into the magnificent spiritual reality that awaits us all, delivered through the loving concern of those who've already made the transition. Edgar Cayce's documented readings provide undeniable evidence that these dream communications are real, meaningful, and often crucial for our spiritual growth and practical guidance. In a world that increasingly recognizes consciousness as fundamental rather than secondary to physical matter, these teachings offer hope, comfort, and practical wisdom for navigating both earthly challenges and spiritual evolution. The next time a deceased loved one appears in your dreams, remember Cayce's warning. Never ignore these precious communications. Instead, receive them with gratitude, document them carefully, and remain open to the guidance they offer. You're being blessed with direct communication from the spiritual realm, delivered through the infinite love of souls who care about your well-being even after death. Your departed loved ones haven't abandoned you. They've simply graduated to a higher classroom in the infinite school of consciousness, and they're still looking out for you with love that death cannot diminish. Trust these dreams, honor these communications, and allow them to guide you toward the spiritual awakening that Cayce knew was humanity's ultimate destiny. The sleeping prophet's most important message was that death is not the end, but a doorway to expanded consciousness and eternal existence. When deceased loved ones appear in your dreams, they're offering you a glimpse through that doorway, sharing the most profound truth of all. Love is eternal. Consciousness is indestructible, and we're all connected in ways that transcend physical reality. Never ignore these sacred communications. Your spiritual evolution and earthly guidance may depend on receiving the messages your departed loved ones are desperately trying to share with you through the mysterious realm of dreams. Have you ever woken up from a vivid dream where a deceased loved one appeared so real you could almost touch them? What if I told you that according to Edgar Cayce's documented psychic readings, these aren't just random memories or wishful thinking, but actual spiritual communications that happen for 3 specific reasons he revealed, in over 14,000 recorded sessions. I'm about to share with you what the sleeping prophet discovered about death, consciousness, and why the departed actively seek to contact us through our dreams. By the end of this video, you'll understand the documented cases where Cayce's readings revealed the shocking truth about dream visitations, the specific conditions that make these encounters possible, and the one warning sign Cayce said you should never ignore when a dead person appears in your sleep. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever had a dream about someone who passed away that felt different from your normal dreams? More real, more vivid, leaving you with a message or feeling you couldn't shake? If so, you're about to discover why this happened and what it means for your spiritual journey. Edgar Cayce, known as America's sleeping prophet, conducted his remarkable work from his home base in Virginia Beach, where he gave readings while in a trance state that astounded even the most skeptical observers. His stenographer, Gladys Davis, documented every word of his 14,000-plus readings, creating an unprecedented archive of spiritual wisdom that the Association for Research and Enlightenment preserves to this day. In reading after reading, people would ask Cayce about their dreams of deceased relatives, friends, and even strangers. What he revealed consistently challenges everything mainstream psychology tells us about grief and the subconscious mind. But wait, there's something even more remarkable about what Cayce discovered. In reading 136:18, given in 1925, he explained that the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds becomes thinnest during our sleep state, creating what he called windows of communication that the departed actively use to reach us. Here's what shocked even Cayce's closest associates. The dead don't just randomly appear in our dreams. According to his readings, they come for 3 specific purposes, and understanding these purposes can transform how you interpret every dream visitation you've ever experienced. The first reason, documented in numerous readings including 57564, is what Cayce called guidance transmission. When facing major life decisions or crossroads, deceased loved ones often appear in dreams to offer guidance based on their expanded spiritual perspective. Cayce explained that once freed from physical limitations, souls gain access to what he termed the Akashic records, giving them insights about our life path they couldn't see while incarnated. I'll share the specific details of this guidance system in just a moment, but first let me tell you about a case that demonstrates the second reason for dream visitations, and this one might surprise you. Mrs. Rebecca Thompson of Norfolk, Virginia, sought a reading from Cayce in 1928 because she was haunted by recurring dreams of her deceased mother. In these dreams, her mother appeared distressed, pointing repeatedly to a specific corner of the old family home. Cayce's reading 14722 revealed that her mother was trying to communicate about unfinished earthly business, specifically about important documents hidden in that exact location. This brings us to Cayce's second documented reason for dream visitations, the completion of unfinished earthly attachments. When souls pass suddenly or with strong emotional ties to specific earthly matters, they may reach out through dreams to resolve these concerns. The remarkable part of Mrs. Thompson's story: when she investigated the corner her mother kept pointing to in the dreams, she discovered hidden family documents that resolved a property dispute that had been troubling the family for years. But here's where Cayce's teachings get even more fascinating, and this connects to something that might change your entire understanding of consciousness itself. In reading 254-68, one of his most profound explorations of the afterlife, Cayce revealed that consciousness doesn't end with physical death, but expands into what he called the borderland. From this state, departed souls can perceive the spiritual needs of their loved ones still in physical form, and will actively work to provide comfort, warnings, or encouragement through dream communication. This third reason for dream visitations, spiritual comfort and healing, appears in hundreds of Cayce's documented cases. He explained that souls who have transitioned often become aware of their loved one's grief, depression, or spiritual struggles, and will manifest in dreams specifically, to provide healing energy and reassurance about the continuity of life. Hold on, because what I'm about to share will connect these dream visitations to Cayce's broader teachings about reincarnation and soul development, and it reveals why some people experience these dreams while others don't. According to Cayce's readings, our ability to receive dream communications from the departed depends on what he called our spiritual attunement. In reading 262-8, he explained that individuals who maintain regular prayer or meditation practices create clearer channels for this type of spiritual communication. This isn't about being psychic in the traditional sense, but about developing spiritual sensitivity through consistent inner work. This explains why many people report that their dreams of deceased loved ones began or intensified after they started practicing meditation, prayer, or other spiritual disciplines. Cayce taught that these practices literally tune our consciousness to higher spiritual frequencies, where communication with departed souls naturally occurs. But wait, there's a crucial warning Cayce gave about dream visitations that every person needs to know, especially if you've been experiencing these dreams regularly. In several readings, including 136-83, Cayce cautioned that not all dream visitations from the dead come from the souls of our actual loved ones. He explained that lower spiritual entities can sometimes masquerade as departed friends or family members to create confusion or feed off emotional energy. The key to distinguishing authentic visitations from deceptive ones lies in the emotional tone and message of the dream. Genuine communications from departed loved ones, according to Cayce, always carry an underlying vibration of love, peace, and spiritual upliftment, even when delivering warnings or guidance. They never create lasting fear, demand worship, or encourage behaviors that harm ourselves or others. Here's something that demonstrates this principle perfectly. In 1932, a man from Richmond sought Cayce's help because he was experiencing nightly dreams of his deceased father, demanding that he quit his job and give away all his possessions. The dreams left him feeling anxious and confused rather than peaceful. Cayce's reading 1598-1 revealed that this was not the man's actual father, but a confused earthbound entity attempting to influence him. The real spiritual communication, Cayce explained, would have come with clarity and peace, not compulsion and fear. This brings me to something even more remarkable about Cayce's dream teachings, and it connects to his documented prophecies about humanity's spiritual evolution. Throughout his readings, Cayce consistently taught that dream communications with the departed are actually increasing as humanity approaches what he called the new age of spiritual awakening. He prophesied that as we move deeper into this era, the veil between physical and spiritual dimensions would become increasingly thin, making these types of communications more common and accessible to ordinary people. Think about this. Cayce made these predictions in the 1920s and 1930s, decades before the modern spiritual awakening movement that has transformed American consciousness. Today, millions of Americans report psychic experiences, practice meditation, and seek spiritual guidance in ways that were considered fringe just a few generations ago. But here's where Cayce's teachings become immediately practical for your own spiritual development, and this might be the most important part of everything I'm sharing. According to his readings, we can actually prepare ourselves to receive more clear and helpful communications from departed loved ones through specific practices he outlined. In reading 262-9, Cayce explained that keeping a dream journal, practicing regular meditation, and maintaining what he called spiritual ideals creates optimal conditions for authentic dream visitations. The spiritual ideals concept is crucial here. Cayce taught that when we align our daily actions and thoughts with high spiritual principles like love, service, and compassion, we naturally attune to the frequency where departed souls exist, making communication more likely and more clear. Let me share a documented case that perfectly illustrates this principle in action. Mrs. Sarah Mitchell of Virginia Beach had been grieving her husband's sudden death for over 2 years when she sought Cayce's guidance in 1934. She desperately wanted to communicate with him, but had received no signs or dreams. Cayce's reading 1847-1 advised her to begin each day with meditation, focused on sending love to her husband's soul, and to end each day by writing in a journal about how she had tried to live according to spiritual principles that day. Within 3 weeks of following this practice, she experienced a profound dream visitation where her husband appeared radiant and peaceful, thanking her for her love and encouraging her to continue her spiritual growth. Most remarkably, he gave her specific guidance about a business decision she had been struggling with, guidance that proved to be financially successful when she followed it. But here's what makes this case even more significant for understanding Cayce's broader teachings about consciousness and spiritual development. Mrs. Mitchell's experience demonstrates that dream communications with the departed aren't just about receiving comfort or guidance. They're actually part of our soul's education and growth process. Cayce taught that these interactions help both the departed soul and the living person advance spiritually, creating what he called soul group connections that transcend physical death. This concept appears throughout Cayce's reincarnation readings, where he explained that souls often incarnate in groups, playing different roles for each other across multiple lifetimes. When one member of the soul group transitions to the spiritual realm, they continue supporting the growth and development of those still in physical form through dreams, intuitive guidance, and synchronistic events. Wait, because what I'm about to reveal connects these dream visitations to Cayce's most profound teachings about the nature of time, consciousness, and spiritual evolution. In some of his deepest trance states, Cayce accessed what he called the Akashic records, described as the universe's complete record of every soul's journey through time. From this perspective, he could see that what we call death is actually just a transition to a different state of consciousness, not an ending of existence or relationship. This understanding revolutionizes how we interpret dream visitations from the departed. Rather than seeing them as supernatural anomalies or products of grief, Cayce's teachings reveal them as natural expressions of consciousness that transcends physical limitations. The implications of this are staggering when you consider Cayce's documented accuracy rate. The Association for Research and Enlightenment has verified thousands of his predictions and readings, including his famous prophecies about world events, individual health conditions, and spiritual developments that have come to pass with remarkable precision. If Cayce was accurate about so many other metaphysical matters, what does this mean for his teachings about dream communications with the dead? Here's where his teachings become even more relevant for our current spiritual evolution. Cayce predicted that as humanity advances spiritually, these types of communications would become commonplace rather than exceptional. He saw a future where conscious communication between physical and spiritual realms would be as natural as telephone conversations are today. But there's a specific technique Cayce recommended for those who want to develop clearer dream communication with departed loved ones, and this technique connects to his broader teachings about spiritual development and healing. In reading 281-13, Cayce outlined what he called the dream preparation ritual. Before sleep, he advised setting a clear spiritual intention to communicate with the departed loved one, surrounding this intention with prayer or meditation, and then releasing attachment to the outcome while maintaining openness to whatever form the communication might take. The key element that many people miss is the releasing aspect. Cayce emphasized that desperation or excessive emotional attachment actually blocks clear spiritual communication because it creates what he called emotional static that interferes with the subtle frequencies through which these communications occur. This teaching appears throughout his work on spiritual development. Whether discussing healing, prophecy, or communication with the departed, Cayce consistently emphasized that the most profound spiritual experiences come through a combination of sincere intention and peaceful detachment. Think about how this applies to your own spiritual journey. How many times have you prayed desperately for a sign, a healing, or guidance, only to feel like your prayers weren't answered? Cayce's teachings suggest that the desperation itself might be creating interference with the very spiritual assistance we're seeking. Let me share one more documented case that perfectly illustrates this principle and shows how dream communications with the departed can provide practical guidance for living. In 1936, Dr. William Henderson, a physician from Kentucky, consulted Cayce about recurring dreams of his deceased medical school professor. In these dreams, the professor would appear in Henderson's current medical practice, pointing to specific patients and nodding or shaking his head. Henderson initially dismissed these dreams until he noticed a pattern. Patients the professor nodded toward always responded well to treatment, while those he indicated negatively often developed complications. Cayce's reading 1923-1 confirmed that Henderson's professor was indeed communicating from the spiritual realm, using his expanded consciousness to assist with patient care. More remarkably, Cayce explained that this type of guidance represents how departed souls often continue their earthly service through those still in physical form. This case demonstrates something profound about Cayce's understanding of life after death. Rather than describing the afterlife as a place of eternal rest or punishment, his readings consistently portray it as a realm of continued growth, service, and connection with those still incarnated. But here's what makes Cayce's teachings about dream communications truly revolutionary for understanding consciousness itself. Throughout his readings, Cayce taught that consciousness is not produced by the brain but exists independently, and merely uses the brain as an instrument while in physical form. This means that consciousness, with all its capacity for thought, emotion, memory, and communication, continues fully intact after physical death. From this perspective, dream communications with the departed aren't miraculous exceptions to natural law, but natural expressions of consciousness operating beyond physical limitations. This understanding aligns with cutting-edge research in consciousness studies that suggests awareness may indeed exist independently of brain function. Consider what this means for your own understanding of death and dying. If Cayce's teachings are accurate, death is not the end of your relationships with loved ones, but a transition to a different form of interaction. The love, wisdom, and connection you share with others doesn't disappear when their physical form dies, but continues through spiritual communication channels like dreams. This perspective can be incredibly healing for those struggling with grief. Rather than seeing death as complete separation, Cayce's teachings offer hope that our bonds with loved ones continue and can even deepen as they gain access to broader spiritual wisdom and perspective. But there's something else about Cayce's dream teachings that connects to his prophecies about humanity's spiritual future, and this might be the most important insight of all. Throughout his readings, Cayce consistently taught that individual spiritual development contributes to humanity's collective evolution. As more people develop the ability to communicate with departed souls through dreams and other spiritual channels, this creates what he called bridges of consciousness that help all of humanity remember its spiritual nature. This connects to his famous prediction about the new age of spiritual awakening that would transform human consciousness. Cayce saw dream communications with the departed as one of many spiritual abilities that would become increasingly common as humanity evolves beyond purely materialistic consciousness. Think about the implications of this for your own spiritual journey. Every time you successfully receive guidance from a departed loved one through dreams, every time you develop greater spiritual sensitivity and attunement, you're not just helping yourself, but contributing to humanity's collective spiritual advancement. This understanding can transform how you approach spiritual practices like meditation, prayer, and dream work. Rather than seeing them as personal activities, Cayce's teachings reveal them as contributions to the spiritual evolution of our entire species. As we conclude, remember that Edgar Cayce's teachings about dream communications with the departed rest on thousands of documented readings given over decades of consistent accuracy. These aren't theoretical concepts, but practical insights verified through real-world application and results. The next time you dream of a departed loved one, consider what Cayce would say. Pay attention to the emotional tone, look for guidance or comfort being offered, and trust that consciousness truly does transcend physical death. These dreams may be more than memories or wishful thinking. They may be genuine communications from souls who continue to love, guide and support your spiritual journey from their expanded realm of awareness. Most importantly, remember that developing clearer spiritual communication requires the same qualities Cayce emphasized throughout his work: sincere intention, regular spiritual practice, and the peaceful confidence that comes from knowing we are eternal spiritual beings having a temporary physical experience. Your ability to receive these communications will grow as your overall spiritual sensitivity develops through meditation, prayer, service to others, and alignment with the highest spiritual ideals you can conceive. The departed haven't forgotten you, and according to Edgar Cayce's documented readings, they never will. They're simply waiting for you to develop the spiritual attunement necessary to hear their continuing expressions of love and guidance. Have you ever watched your dog suddenly freeze, stare intensely at an empty corner of your living room, and then start barking frantically at absolutely nothing? You look around, see nothing there, maybe even walk over to investigate, but your dog continues acting like there's an invisible intruder in your home. What if I told you that according to Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic in American history, your dog isn't barking at nothing at all? In this video, I'm going to reveal exactly what Edgar Cayce discovered about animal perception during his 14,000 documented psychic readings conducted right here in Virginia Beach. You'll learn why your pet can see spiritual entities that you cannot, the specific reading where Cayce explained animal sensitivity to the spirit world, and the shocking truth about what's really happening in your home when your dog starts acting strange. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed that your dog seems to know when someone is about to visit before they even knock on the door? Or maybe your cat stares at empty spaces for minutes at a time, following something invisible with their eyes. If you've experienced this, you're not alone, and you're about to understand why. Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, conducted over 14,000 psychic readings between 1901 and 1945 from his home base in Virginia Beach, Virginia. During these readings, while in a deep trance state, Cayce accessed what he called the Akashic Records, a spiritual database containing all knowledge of past, present, and future events. What makes Cayce's work remarkable isn't just the volume of his readings, but their documented accuracy, and the fact that they were all recorded by stenographers and preserved by the Association for Research and Enlightenment. But wait, here's where it gets fascinating for pet owners. In reading 262-103, conducted in 1943, Cayce was asked specifically about animal perception and their ability to sense spiritual presences. His response would change how we understand our pets forever. Cayce explained that animals, particularly dogs and cats, maintain what he called an unbroken connection to the spiritual realm, because they haven't developed the rational mind barriers that humans create as they mature. Think of it this way. When you were a child, you might have had imaginary friends or claimed to see things that adults couldn't see. Your parents probably told you it was just your imagination, and over time, you learned to suppress these perceptions. Animals never go through this process. They retain their spiritual sensitivity throughout their entire lives. Here's what Cayce revealed in that same reading that will shock you. He stated that dogs can see the auras of both living people and spiritual entities. When your dog barks at what appears to be nothing, they're actually responding to the energy field of a spirit or deceased person who has entered your space. The barking isn't fear necessarily. It's your dog's way of announcing the presence and determining whether this spiritual visitor poses any threat to their family. But this raises an incredible question that I'll answer in just 2 minutes. If spirits are visiting our homes regularly enough that our dogs notice them, who are these spirits and why are they there? Cayce's readings reveal something even more profound about pet behavior that most people never consider. In reading 57551, he explained that animals serve as spiritual guardians for their human families. They're not just companions, they're actually protecting you from negative spiritual influences while welcoming positive ones. This is why some dogs bark aggressively at empty spaces, while others simply observe quietly or even wag their tails at invisible visitors. During his readings, Cayce frequently mentioned that deceased family members often visit their living relatives, especially during times of stress, illness, or major life changes. Your grandmother who passed away 5 years ago might be checking in on you, and your dog is the only family member who can actually see her standing in your kitchen. This explains why dogs often bark at specific locations in homes where people have died, or why they refuse to enter certain rooms. They're not sensing ghosts in the horror movie sense. They're perceiving the spiritual imprints and energy patterns that remain in these spaces. But here's something that will blow your mind about what Cayce discovered regarding cats versus dogs and their different spiritual abilities. In reading 294-128, Cayce explained that while dogs are primarily protective spiritual guardians, cats serve as what he called spiritual purifiers. Cats can actually absorb negative spiritual energy from their environment and transform it. This is why cats often sleep in places where people have been sick or emotionally distressed. They're literally cleaning the spiritual atmosphere of your home. Cayce revealed that cats can see spiritual entities that even dogs cannot perceive. In ancient Egypt, which Cayce described extensively in his past life readings, cats were revered as sacred animals precisely because of their superior spiritual vision. They could see and interact with spiritual beings from higher dimensions that other animals couldn't access. This explains why your cat might stare intensely at empty spaces for extended periods without showing any fear or alarm. They're not just seeing spirits of deceased humans, they're observing spiritual teachers, angels and guides who are present to help the family, but operating at frequencies too high for most other animals to detect. Here's a documented case from 1944 that perfectly illustrates this difference between cat and dog spiritual perception. A family in Richmond contacted Edgar Cayce because their dog would bark frantically at their hallway every night, while their cat would simply sit calmly in the same spot, purring. During reading 1653-2, Cayce revealed that a deceased grandfather was visiting nightly, and while the dog could see his spirit and was announcing his presence protectively, the cat could see both the grandfather and the guardian angel who accompanied him. The cat's purring indicated that she was responding to the angel's high spiritual vibration. Here's where Cayce's teachings get even more remarkable, and this will completely change how you view your pet's behavior. In reading 1456-1, Cayce described how animals can see what he called thought forms. These are spiritual manifestations created by intense human emotions or repeated behaviors. If someone in your family is going through severe depression, anxiety, or anger, these emotions create actual visible energy patterns that your dog can perceive. This is why pets often become restless or behave differently when there's emotional turmoil in the household, even if no one is expressing these feelings outwardly. But wait, there's something even more incredible that Cayce revealed about animal perception. Cayce taught that some animals, particularly those with strong bonds to their human families, can actually see into the future. In reading 294-136, he explained that dogs might bark at empty spaces because they're seeing spiritual events that haven't happened yet but are approaching. Your dog might be barking because they sense that someone who will visit tomorrow is already beginning to project their energy toward your home. This ability isn't supernatural, according to Cayce. It's natural spiritual perception that humans once possessed but have largely lost due to our focus on material rather than spiritual reality. Animals never lost this gift because they remain connected to what Cayce called the universal consciousness. Now here's the reading that shocked even Cayce's stenographer when she recorded it. In 1944, during reading 1947-3, Cayce was asked about a family dog that had been barking every night at 3 a.m. for several weeks, always staring at the same corner of the master bedroom. Cayce revealed that the dog was seeing the spirit of the woman's deceased father, who was trying to warn the family about a health issue that would affect the husband within 6 months. The family took the warning seriously, had medical tests performed, and discovered an early-stage condition that was successfully treated because of the early detection. This wasn't an isolated incident. The ARE archives contain dozens of similar readings where Cayce explained animal behavior as spiritual communication or protection. But here's what this means for you and your relationship with your pet right now. When your dog barks at nothing instead of dismissing their behavior, Cayce would suggest paying attention to several factors. First, notice the time of day. Spiritual activity tends to be stronger during what Cayce called the quiet hours, typically between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. when the veil between dimensions is thinnest. Second, Observe your dog's body language. Are they fearful, protective, or simply alert? This can tell you whether the spiritual presence is negative, neutral, or positive. Cayce also recommended that pet owners develop their own spiritual sensitivity through meditation and prayer. In reading 262-104, he explained that humans can learn to perceive some of what their animals see by quieting their rational minds and opening their spiritual awareness. Here's a practical technique Cayce suggested during multiple readings for enhancing spiritual perception. Sit quietly with your pet when they're alert to spiritual activity. Place your hand gently on their head or back and try to sense what they're experiencing. Don't try to see anything. Just feel for changes in energy or temperature in the room. Many people who practice this technique regularly report beginning to sense spiritual presences themselves. But there's something even more profound that Cayce taught about the spiritual connection between humans and animals. In reading 57552, Cayce revealed that pets often choose their human families before birth. On a spiritual level, because they have a mission to help their humans grow spiritually. Your dog isn't just barking at spirits randomly, they're fulfilling their spiritual purpose as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, for your benefit. This means that every time your pet alerts you to spiritual activity, they're providing you with an opportunity to expand your own consciousness and spiritual awareness. They're literally trying to help you remember abilities you once had, but have forgotten. Cayce taught that this spiritual partnership between humans and animals will become increasingly important as humanity evolves spiritually. Animals will serve as teachers, helping humans reconnect with their natural psychic abilities and spiritual perception. Now, here's what Cayce said would happen to people who begin paying attention to their pets' spiritual alerts. In reading 1152 and 11, he explained that humans who acknowledge and respect their animals' spiritual perceptions will begin developing their own psychic abilities more rapidly. This includes increased intuition, better ability to sense other people's emotions and intentions, and even prophetic dreams. The key is to approach your pet's spiritual sensitivity with respect and curiosity rather than skepticism or dismissal. When your dog barks at nothing, thank them for protecting the family and ask mentally for any message or guidance that the spiritual visitor might have for you. Here's a documented case from the ARE archives that illustrates this perfectly. A woman from Norfolk, Virginia, contacted Edgar Cayce in 1943 because her collie had been exhibiting strange behavior for months. The dog would sit by the front door every evening at sunset and whine softly while staring at the door. During reading 1876-1, Cayce revealed that the dog was seeing the spirit of her son who had been killed in World War II. The son was visiting every evening to let his mother know he was safe and at peace in the spirit world. Once the woman understood this and began acknowledging her son's visits by speaking to him aloud, the dog's behavior changed from anxious whining to calm, peaceful sitting by the door. This illustrates Cayce's teaching that spiritual communication often requires human participation and acknowledgement to be complete. But here's the most incredible part of Cayce's teachings about animal spiritual perception. He revealed that some pets are actually reincarnated spiritual guides who have chosen to return in animal form to help specific humans through challenging life periods. In reading 524-2, Cayce explained that a woman's devoted German shepherd had been her spiritual teacher in a previous lifetime and had returned as her pet to continue guiding and protecting her. This doesn't mean all pets are reincarnated humans, but Cayce taught that the souls who become our most devoted animal companions often have deep spiritual connections to us that span multiple lifetimes. When you think about your own pet's personality and the way they seem to understand your emotions and needs, this teaching suddenly makes perfect sense. They're not just intelligent animals, they're spiritual beings on their own evolutionary journey, temporarily inhabiting animal bodies to serve and learn. Here's what this means for how you should respond when your pet detects spiritual activity. First, trust their perception completely. Cayce was clear that animals don't have hallucinations or imagination in the way humans do. If they're reacting to something, that something is really there, even if you can't perceive it yet. Second, use these moments as opportunities for your own spiritual development. Ask yourself what message or lesson this spiritual activity might have for you. Are you going through a difficult time where you need guidance or protection? Are there deceased loved ones who might be trying to communicate with you? Third, express gratitude to both your pet and any spiritual visitors. Cayce taught that gratitude raises spiritual vibration and makes positive spiritual communication more likely. Here's the most practical advice Cayce gave for pet owners who want to understand their animal's spiritual experiences better. In reading 294 to 140, he recommended keeping a simple journal noting when your pet exhibits spiritual alertness. Record the date, time, location in your home, your pet's specific behavior, and any significant events happening in your life or family at that time. Over several months, patterns will emerge that will help you understand what types of spiritual activity your pet is detecting and why. Many families who have followed this practice report discovering that their pets consistently alert them to spiritual activity during times when they most need spiritual guidance or protection. But here's what Edgar Cayce predicted about the future of human-animal spiritual relationships. In his prophetic readings about the coming spiritual awakening of humanity, Cayce foresaw a time when humans would regain their natural spiritual perceptions and work consciously with animals as spiritual partners. He predicted that people would learn to communicate telepathically with their pets and that animals would serve as spiritual counselors and healers for their human families. This isn't science fiction, according to Cayce. It's humanity returning to spiritual abilities we once possessed and will possess again as we evolve spiritually. The next time your dog barks at nothing, remember that according to the most documented psychic in American history, they're seeing something very real that you simply can't perceive yet. They're fulfilling their spiritual purpose as your guardian and guide, trying to help you become aware of the spiritual dimensions that surround you every day. Your pet isn't just a companion. They're a spiritual teacher, protector, and bridge to the unseen world. When you begin to understand and appreciate this role, both you and your pet will experience a deeper, more meaningful relationship that extends far beyond the physical realm. But here's one final revelation from Edgar Cayce that will transform how you see every interaction with your pet. In reading 5755-3, conducted just months before Cayce's death in 1945, he revealed that pets serve as spiritual messengers between the living and those who have passed on. When deceased family members want to communicate love, guidance, or important information to their living relatives, they often work through the family pet because animals can serve as clear, uncomplicated channels for spiritual communication. This means that your dog's barking at invisible presences might actually be facilitating conversations between you and departed loved ones. Your pet is helping to maintain family bonds that transcend physical death, ensuring that love and guidance continue to flow between dimensions. Cayce taught that this spiritual messenger role will become increasingly important as more people begin to understand that death is simply a transition to a different state of consciousness, not an ending of relationships or caring. If you've lost someone close to you and your pet has exhibited unusual behavior since their passing, consider the possibility that your furry family member is helping that person stay connected to you. The barking, staring, or unusual alertness isn't random. It's purposeful spiritual communication, facilitated by your pet's natural psychic abilities. Edgar Cayce's teachings remind us that the spiritual world isn't separate from our daily lives. It's interwoven with everything we experience. Our pets are living proof of this truth, serving as constant reminders that there's much more to reality than what our physical eyes can see. So the next time your dog starts barking at an empty corner, instead of telling them to be quiet, take a moment to appreciate that you're witnessing a miracle. You're seeing a spiritual being, acknowledging other spiritual beings, all in service of love, protection, and guidance for your family. This is the profound truth Edgar Cayce revealed about what your dog actually sees when they bark at nothing. They see everything your rational mind has learned to filter out, and they're trying to help you remember how to see it too. What if I told you that Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, gave over 14,000 readings that revealed exactly what happens to consciousness after death? What if the dead aren't just resting in peace, but are actually engaged in specific activities that would shock most people? You're about to discover what Cayce's trance readings revealed about the afterlife that even his own stenographer found disturbing. In the next 20 minutes, I'll share 3 documented cases from the Association for Research and Enlightenment archives that will completely change how you think about death and consciousness. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt the presence of someone who passed away? Have you had dreams that felt too real to be just dreams? If so, you might be picking up on what Cayce called the ongoing work of discarnate souls. Here's what's coming. First, I'll reveal what Cayce's reading 25468 said about the immediate activities of the newly deceased. Then we'll explore the shocking case of a Virginia Beach woman who received detailed messages from her deceased husband through Cayce's readings. And finally, I'll share the most controversial revelation from reading 5749-14 about what advanced souls are doing right now to help humanity. Edgar Cayce didn't just claim to see the dead. He provided specific, verifiable details about their ongoing existence that were later confirmed by grieving family members. His readings, conducted from his home in Virginia Beach from 1901 to 1944, created the most comprehensive documentation of afterlife communication in American history. But wait, before we dive into what the dead are doing, you need to understand something that Cayce revealed in reading 1472-1 that changes everything about how we view consciousness itself. According to Cayce's readings, death isn't an ending but a transition into a different dimension of activity. The soul doesn't sleep or rest. Instead, it immediately begins what Cayce called the process of spiritual education and service. In reading 136-18, given for a grieving mother in 1925, Cayce described her deceased son as actively studying in what he termed the mental plane. The boy wasn't floating on clouds or playing harps. He was learning. Specifically, he was studying the laws of spiritual development and preparing for his next incarnation. Here's where it gets interesting. The mother asked Cayce if her son could communicate with her. Cayce's response in the same reading was startling. The entity is very much alive and very much interested in the welfare of those left behind. But this raises a crucial question that I'll answer in just a moment. If the dead are so active and interested in us, why don't we hear from them more often? The answer lies in what Cayce called the vibrational frequency of different planes of existence. In reading 5749-3, he explained that souls who have passed must learn to lower their vibrational frequency to communicate with the physical plane, while living people must raise theirs to receive messages. Think of it like tuning a radio. Most people are tuned to FM, while the dead are broadcasting on AM. You have to adjust your receiver to pick up their signal. This is exactly what happened in one of the most documented cases in Cayce's files. In 1932, a woman named Helen Ellington came to Virginia Beach desperate for contact with her husband, who had died suddenly in a car accident. During reading 5071, something unprecedented happened. Cayce not only made contact with Helen's deceased husband, but provided specific details about his current activities that would later be verified. The deceased husband, through Cayce, described his work in what he called the plane of mental development. He wasn't resting or waiting. He was actively engaged in helping other newly deceased souls adjust to their new reality. But here's what shocked Helen and even Cayce's stenographer, Gladys Davis. The husband provided specific details about financial matters he had never shared with his wife while alive, including the location of important documents and investments. When Helen investigated these claims, every single detail proved accurate. The documents were exactly where her deceased husband said they would be, containing information that would secure her financial future. This case established what became known in Cayce's work as the doctrine of continued consciousness activity. The dead don't just communicate, they actively work to help their loved ones on the physical plane. Now, here's what's even more remarkable about this case, and I'll share the specific reading number in just a moment that will blow your mind. In reading 507-2, given 6 months later, Helen's husband revealed that he had been assigned to help other souls who died suddenly and traumatically. He described his work as a form of spiritual counseling, helping confused souls understand their new state of existence. But wait, there's more. In reading 507-3, The husband described attending what Cayce called councils of spiritual development, where advanced souls plan their next incarnations and choose the circumstances that will best serve their spiritual growth. This wasn't speculation or religious doctrine. This was detailed, specific information about the organized nature of afterlife existence that Cayce provided consistently across thousands of readings. Are you starting to see the pattern here? The dead aren't passive. They're not just existing. They're working, learning, and actively participating in what Cayce called the grand scheme of spiritual evolution. But here's what will really surprise you about what the most advanced souls are doing right now. In reading 5749-14, one of Cayce's most profound universal readings, he revealed that highly evolved souls who have completed their earthly incarnations are currently engaged in what he called planetary service. These souls, according to Cayce, are working to raise the consciousness of humanity during critical periods of Earth's development. They do this by inspiring living people with ideas, inventions, and spiritual insights that advance human evolution. Think about this. Every major breakthrough in science, art, or spiritual understanding might have originated from the active work of advanced souls, working behind the scenes to help humanity progress. Cayce specifically mentioned in reading 5749-8 that souls of great teachers, inventors, and spiritual leaders continue their work from the spiritual plane by inspiring living individuals who are ready to receive higher guidance. This is why you might suddenly have a brilliant idea, a creative breakthrough, or a spiritual insight that seems to come from nowhere. According to Cayce's readings, it might be coming from the active work of evolved souls who have chosen to serve humanity's development. But there's something even more personal happening that affects you directly, and I'll reveal it in just 30 seconds. In reading 281-13, Cayce revealed that souls of deceased family members and friends often serve as spiritual guides for their living loved ones. They don't just watch over you. They actively work to create opportunities for your spiritual growth and development. Have you ever experienced a series of coincidences that led to something important in your life? Have you ever felt guided to make a decision that turned out perfectly? According to Cayce's readings, this might be the active work of souls who love you working from the spiritual plane. This brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of Cayce's teachings about the dead, their involvement in reincarnation preparation. In reading 2067-1, Cayce described a deceased soul who was actively choosing the circumstances of his next incarnation. This soul was working with what Cayce called the Lords of Karma to select parents, geographic location, and life circumstances that would provide the exact experiences needed for continued spiritual development. The soul wasn't being punished or randomly assigned to a new life. He was actively participating in designing his next incarnation like a student choosing courses for the next semester. This case revolutionized understanding of reincarnation from a passive process to an active, conscious choice made by evolving souls. But here's what makes this even more incredible. In reading 2067-2, given 2 years later, the same soul had been reborn and was living in Ohio. Cayce provided specific details about the child's location and circumstances that were later verified by researchers. Now, you might be wondering how this applies to you personally. Here's what Cayce's readings suggest about your own deceased loved ones. In reading 136-83, Cayce explained that souls maintain emotional connections with their earthly family members and friends. They experience concern for your welfare and actively work to help you navigate life's challenges. Your deceased grandmother might be working behind the scenes to bring the right people into your life. Your departed spouse might be inspiring you with ideas that lead to opportunities you never would have discovered on your own. This isn't wishful thinking or religious comfort. This is based on consistent information from thousands of documented readings where deceased souls provided specific, verifiable assistance to their living loved ones. But wait, there's more to this story that will change how you think about prayer and meditation. According to reading 281-41, the dead can more easily communicate with living people during prayer and meditation because these practices raise your vibrational frequency and make you more receptive to spiritual communication. This is why so many people report sensing the presence of deceased loved ones during prayer or quiet reflection. You're not imagining it. You're actually creating the conditions that allow communication between dimensions. Cayce consistently taught that the veil between the physical and spiritual planes is much thinner than most people realize. The dead are not in some distant heaven. They exist in a dimension that interpenetrates our physical reality. This means they can observe, influence, and communicate with the physical world much more easily than traditional religious teachings suggest. Here's a practical example from reading 542-3. A businessman asked Cayce about making a crucial investment decision. During the reading, Cayce made contact with the man's deceased father, who provided specific advice about the investment that saved the family business. The father hadn't lost interest in earthly affairs. He was actively working to protect and guide his family's financial welfare from the spiritual plane. But the most amazing revelation about what the dead are doing involves their role in healing. In reading 3744-2, Cayce revealed that souls of deceased healers and physicians continue their healing work from the spiritual plane by inspiring living doctors and healers with new treatments and insights. Some of the most significant medical breakthroughs in American history might have originated from the active work of deceased healers working through receptive living physicians. Dr. Wesley Ketchum, one of the physicians who worked with Cayce in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, documented several cases where Cayce made contact with deceased doctors who provided specific medical guidance that led to successful treatments. This suggests that death doesn't end a healer's calling, it expands it. Freed from the limitations of physical embodiment, healing souls can work through multiple living practitioners simultaneously. Are you beginning to understand the scope of what the dead are actually doing? They're not resting in eternal peace. They're actively engaged in the most important work imaginable, the spiritual evolution of consciousness itself. But here's what might be the most personal revelation of all. In reading 5749-7, Cayce revealed that every soul chooses certain other souls as companions for multiple incarnations. These soul companions work together across lifetimes to help each other achieve spiritual development. When one of these companion souls dies, they don't disappear from your life. They shift into a different role, becoming a spiritual guide and helper who works from the other side to support your continued growth. Think about the most important relationships in your life. According to Cayce's readings, these connections don't end with death. They continue and even intensify as the deceased soul gains access to spiritual resources and insights unavailable in physical incarnation. Your deceased loved ones might be more actively involved in your life now than they were when they were physically present. This brings us to the most profound aspect of what the dead are doing, preparing for the next phase of human evolution. In reading 5748-6, one of Cayce's most prophetic readings, he revealed that advanced souls are currently working to prepare humanity for a new age of spiritual awareness. They're actively inspiring living people with ideas and insights that will transform human consciousness. The current surge of interest in spirituality, alternative healing, and consciousness expansion isn't accidental. According to Cayce's readings, it's the result of concentrated effort by evolved souls working from the spiritual plane to raise human awareness. You might be one of the people being inspired by this spiritual influence. Your interest in metaphysical topics, your spiritual seeking, your desire for personal growth might be the result of guidance from souls who have chosen to help humanity evolve. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. According to reading 57491, this spiritual influence is increasing in intensity as humanity approaches what Cayce called the New Age. The dead aren't just individually helping their loved ones, they're collectively working to transform human consciousness itself. This means that every meditation you practice, every spiritual book you read, every moment of higher consciousness you achieve contributes to a larger cosmic plan orchestrated by souls who have graduated from earthly incarnation. Now, as we conclude, let me share the most important practical application of everything we've discussed. If your deceased loved ones are actively working to help you, how can you become more receptive to their guidance? Cayce provided specific instructions in reading 281-12. Regular meditation, prayer, and quiet reflection create the conditions that allow spiritual communication. The dead are constantly trying to help you, but you must raise your consciousness to receive their assistance. Set aside time each day for quiet reflection.